I cheated on my husband with one of his friends and now I don't know what to do. I want him back. My life is terrible without him. This is a lengthy narrative. My spouse, 26 male, and I have been married for about 3 months, but we've been dating since my sophomore year of high school, his senior year. We've done everything together when he went to college. We made sure that I went to the same school. He even turned down a better scholarship to go to a school that I had a better chance of getting into because he was one of the smart kids and I was one of the more average kids, and when he finished, he immediately started working so that he could support us, and I dropped out because he knew I hated school. He works as a software engineer right now, leaving company, unnamed obviously. Sorry for the lengthy introduction, but I just wanted to emphasize that I love him with all of my being and for all he's done for me, and I wouldn't trade him for anything. I remain at home and do the usual cleaning, cooking, and housekeeping. So we have a nice connection, and we both put in a lot of effort to keep things running well. Before I go any further, I should mention that my physical attraction to him has changed while we were in college. He's been working less and coming to the gym less often since he began working. He's not overweight, but it's clear that he doesn't have as much muscle, and the things he had in college, such as his six-pack, which he knows I used to like, are long gone. Maybe less exercise diminished his testosterone since sex isn't as often, and when we do have it, it's not as intense as it used to be. Starting a few months back, one of his best friends, whom I'll call David, began coming over to hang out. Normally, I don't enjoy having his pals around so regularly, but me and David hit it off right away. David and I hit it off, and my husband was overjoyed that I was finally getting along with his friends, but as usual, he went back to work and spent less time with me, which could have been one of the reasons I cheated. When we were getting married, he assured me that we wouldn't lose contact like in the movies, and that he wouldn't desert me for business, but that's precisely what I believe occurred. David began swinging by a few hours before my husband arrived home to wait for him comfortably, so we began hanging together. We did everything together that I believed my spouse should have done with me. We binge-watched Netflix, spoke about so much, went to the movies, and whenever others saw us, they remarked I looked happy, which I believe you were at the time. David began coming by to hang out with me more than my husband, so he arrived earlier and earlier until it was just at the beginning of the day if he didn't have class. He's working on his master's. When he came over and we began binge-watching Netflix one morning, I didn't have as many clothes on as normal since he arrived at about 9 a.m., which was somewhat earlier than intended, but I was already so comfortable with him that it didn't matter. I was only wearing a big shirt and some underwear, and I didn't realize until it was too late that I wasn't wearing a bra, so I felt awkward. Then David, as a joke, took off his clothes and climbed into bed next to me saying it was undies time, and he was abnormally close, but I ended up moving in even closer. He placed his hand on my thigh, and I moved to sit between his legs, and before I knew it, he twisted me around and began grinding an erection against me, and I kissed him. I didn't intend for it to go any further, but he was everything that my husband wasn't anymore. He was still built, and I could tell he really wanted me more than my own husband had. So we ended up having sex. Of course, I trusted him, so we never used protection throughout that day, and he gave me the opportunity to feel ways and do things I hadn't done in so long. I expected to feel bad right away, but I didn't. I was just happy to be desired, wanted, and satisfied again. David and I continued this relationship for months, and I ended up giving him the nickname hubby because I truly felt like he was my true husband the way he treated me. But of course, he began to become possessive as men do, and this is where the major problems began. He wanted my wedding ring off whenever we had sex, and I ended up losing it, which my husband instantly noticed since I made a point of never taking it off. But it wasn't the only thing. David urged me to stop kissing my husband or really treating him like he was my husband at all, and I did it, and I treated my husband like because he misled me into feeling he was a lousy husband in person for abandoning me so completely. I went back on birth control, and we never used protection since he didn't like it, and I never complained because I simply liked being taken again. I stopped kissing my spouse, placed as much space between us in bed as possible, and resolved never to have with him again. When I was furious or frustrated, I would call him fat and ugly, which ruined my marriage. David was still around, and I guess my husband realized how in love I was with David because he began making accusations, and of course David became possessive again. So when my husband told him he couldn't come over anymore, he sent my husband months' worth of the pictures, videos, and messages we had made and sent each other as some sick payback. Upon returning home, my husband became upset and began shouting and hurling things at me, and I had no idea what to do. I realized David didn't care about me nearly as much as my husband did if he was willing to expose me in such a public manner. He started yelling about how hard he was working, as if I wasn't a help around the house, and he broke a lot of my personal belongings while doing so. He was shouting in the corner, mumbling something about wanting to kill himself, and I was scared because he would strike out at any time without warning. His half-yelling, half-sobbing questions about how frequently and for how long it had been going on persisted, and I broke down and sobbed, telling him everything that had happened to me and him. Once again, he became outraged when he saw the video on his phone, which showed me telling David that I loved him and that he was better than my husband, among other disparaging remarks. As a result of the videos, he learned that we had in our marriage bed and that we never used a condom, as well as that he always completed within me, and I could sense something in him cracking, perhaps because it was my first time back in high school and I didn't let him do any of that until we were married. He started scratching at his skin, harming himself in weird ways, and insulting himself in the same way I would insult him when I was unhappy, and I became concerned that he was going insane. I called the police and they said he had gone insane. Because of the raving, the neighbors called the authorities, who took his side a little more than mine and asked me if I had a place to stay, so I'm not sure whether he was taken to the hospital or if he was released. I'm back at my mother's house and working part-time, and I'm kicking myself for all I've done. Even though I haven't been able to entirely separate myself from David, I think that he started to care for me when my husband abandoned me and that he has continued to be there for me to this day. David now refers to me as wifey, which is hurtful since I honestly just want my husband back. We haven't technically divorced, but he won't talk to me, respond to my messages, or do anything else to make things better for us. If I send a third party to the location, he just directs them to notify me that he wants to divorce me and that I should see an attorney immediately. I'm not sure how I'll do in the divorce, given that he paid for everything and David has a mountain of evidence to prove that I cheated on my husband. I want this to be completed and put behind me. What can I do to get him back in my possession? And how will I fare in the event of a divorce if I don't do so? I was able to reach my husband's sister after posting this story, who told me that he is not doing well mentally at the moment. Her husband hasn't been eating and has lost a significant amount of weight, and he only does work, sleep, and eat every other day or so, according to her. In addition, she alleges that I have caused him to suffer practically irrevocable damage to his self-confidence, as he is now afraid to go out in public because he fears that people would laugh at him. To be quite honest, I don't see how his mental health is my responsibility. It is his response and choice to do what he is doing that I am responsible for. In the meanwhile, she continues to press me to sign the form and threatens me with the documentation David sent to him. I'm not going to attempt to get him back until I know he isn't going to do anything drastic like what he did the night he found out what had happened.